Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at a rogue deck for the 2004 format that's going to be a Rayquaza EX Venusaur deck. Now, I'm going to be upfront and say that I did not come up with this combo. This was actually, I saw somebody else playing it, and then I took the idea and built my own list for it, which I would say is pretty different than theirs, but yeah, the original concept's not mine. If anybody does know who came up with the original idea, please post it down below because I'd love to give credit because it's a really cool rogue deck. One of the things, and then I was talking about with a friend a couple of weeks ago, was how unusual it was. I don't want to say unusual. I'll say how it's become very standard in 2004 for Blaziken to not run Rayquaza. It made a lot of sense. Blaziken had a lot of tools. And in general, people came to realize that Ruby Sapphire Blaziken is just very strong by itself. And incorporating a bunch of cards like multi-energies, multiple copies of Switch and Warp Point to include a single copy of Rayquaza was generally not worth it. Ironically, though, Rayquaza can be very difficult for Gorbis decks to deal with. Most Gorbis decks aren't going to run any sort of Crystal Shard, and they rely very heavily on Desert Ruins to get some chip damage in. And then they probably, at best, two-shot the Rayquaza. That minus 30 damage to water is just really hard to get over sometimes. Well, Rayquaza has a very easy time one-hit KOing Gorbuses. Now, usually this isn't too big of a deal because against Blaziken decks, you usually have a little bit of time to set up, get a lot of energy in play. You're going to stick that Desert Ruins. It's going to add a lot of chip damage to that Rayquaza. So generally you can push over a single Rayquaza with relative ease. However, Rayquaza in itself does still provide a lot of good counters to it. So when I saw somebody playing this variation of the deck, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. You have room in the deck to play counter stadiums to bump the Desert Ruins. And since you're going with a much heavier Rayquaza build, you actually do have, I'm going to say you put so much more emphasis into it. It's not like they have to just power through a single copy of it and then roll on to victory. They do have to fight through multiple copies of Rayquaza, which can be very challenging for them. Now, the basic concept of the deck is pretty simple. We use this Venusaur, which has the Harvest Bounty Pokepower, but essentially whenever you attach energy to your active Pokemon, you can attach an additional energy to that Pokemon at the exact same time. So also keep in mind that it doesn't have to be a basic energy and that it does stack. So if we have Rayquaza in the active spot, we can attach, say, a fire energy to it, and then we can attach, let's say, a multi-energy. Right there, we're doing 80 damage that turn, and if we have two Venusaurs in play, we can attach a third energy, so we can go like multi-fire, fire, and then hit for 120. Or if we're playing against something like Gorbis, we can just go lightning, fire, fire, and hit for 80. It makes it very, very easy to just take repeated one-hit KOs, which I gotta also add is a lot of fun to do because it's not necessarily very common in the 2004 format. And it can be very, I'm gonna say frustrating for an opponent just to get one-hit KO'd every single turn. Now, essentially, the entire concept's around this Rayquaza. Only thing we're really ever going to attack within the deck is going to be this Rayquaza. There's some strengths and some weaknesses to that. The strength is we obviously have a very focused deck. The weakness is we don't really have a different game plan other than just keep throwing Rayquazas at our opponent. To back this up, we play a 2-2 Delcatty line, 2-2 Magneton line. Not only does this provide us a lot of consistency in the deck, that Magneton's always going to make sure that we have the energy to get on their Rayquaza with the Venusaur and then our normal attachment. So we always got energy in the deck. We always got options. We got a lot of draw power. It's just a fun, fast, consistent deck. Now, I'm not going to lie. This is not going to break the 2004 format. This isn't even another Tier 1 deck to consider. It's, in all honesty, probably a Tier 3 deck. It's a lot of fun to play. It matches up well against certain decks in the format. But just relying, your entire game plan relying on 100 hit point EX, it's not the best deck in the format. It's probably a tier 3 deck. But once again, it's a lot of fun to play, and I think something that's worth messing around with in the 2004 format. So let's go ahead, just jump on into the deck here, and we'll take a look at some of the card choices. For Dunsparce, we use Dunsparce to set up here. Not only, we've talked about this before for the 2004 format, but it also helps you thin your deck out, which can be really key. But essentially you can grab, let's say, a Bulbasaur, Magnemite, Skitty. Your ideal setup is going to be 2 Venusaur on the bench, or Rayquaza, a Magneton, and then a Delcatty. Generally, once that Dunsparce goes down, you do need to get a second Rayquaza in play. So ideally, you're going to have 2 Bulbasaur, or 2 Venusaur, 2 Rayquaza, Magnemite, Magneton. That's going to be your 6. I went with a 3-1-3 Venusaur. I played around with this quite a lot. I went as thin as 2-1-2. I went as thick as 3-3-3, just avoiding the rare candy. I generally found that I do want rare candy in the deck, and generally in the later stages of the game, you do need to have 2 Venusaur in play. So I wanted to play that thicker line of 3-1-3. The deck plays a very heavy Oracle count because of the 2-2 Delcatty Magneton. So I do find the rare candy to be stronger than playing a thicker of the stage 1 line. 3 copies of Rayquaza. We went with 3 copies, 3 EXs, 6 prizes. The downside to this, and this has come up rarely, but it has come up, is I don't play Town Volunteers in the deck. So if one of the Rayquazas is one of my last prizes, it can cause issues because nothing other than the Rayquaza in the deck can really take prizes. I think you could play 4th copy Rayquaza. I think you could also play 4th copy, or a copy of Town Volunteers. Both of those would be good options in the deck. 2-2 Magneton. I do want to note we do play the Sniping Magnemite. I think it's slightly better in this deck. It can help set up math for the Rayquaza or take a cheap prize and something on the bench. 2-2 Delcatty. Play the Skitty to search out the basic energy. And then for our supporter lineup here, it's going to be pretty standard with the 4 Copycat, 4 Stevens. We do go with a very heavy Oracle count and a lower Underground Expedition count. This isn't typical for a lot of the decks that you see that I've shown on the channel lately. I do think in general Underground is better. But the reason that we did play the higher Oracle count is because we do have that higher Delcatty Magneton count. And there's a lot of things in the deck we need to be able to directly search out. We need to be able to find our multis and our switches in particular very, very easily when we need to find them. And then also it helps set up that Venusaur line a lot better than an Underground Expedition does. 2 Pokemon Nurse. I think it's good in the deck. I don't know if you need 2. I think a single copy might work. But essentially we're always going to be discarding all the energy after Rayquaza. So in like the Gorbis matchup in particular, they'll come up, hit you for like 70, and then you can just nurse it off. And rinse and repeat this combo a couple of times. But if you were looking for a spot in the deck, I think you could drop a copy of Nurse. 2 Underground Expedition. We are a little bit thicker on the supporter lineups just for consistency. Going to 4, 8, 11. This is like 13. I like it. I think 13 is good. But yeah, it is a little bit thicker than you sometimes will see in like Blaziken decks, for example. 3 Friend Ball. We're playing really common types in the deck. Usually Friend Ball will get you either that Rayquaza, or it'll help set up that Delcatty Magneton engine, which will lead to everything else. 2 Rare Candy, 2 Switch. I would like a 3rd Switch in the deck, but generally you don't have the problem with Blaziken where you have to get the Rayquaza back to the bench so it can then get fire started onto. In this deck, you actually won in the active spot for the Venusaur's Harvest Bounty. 2 Ancient Ruins. Essentially, we needed a counter stadium. A lot of decks play 2 Desert Ruins. We had to play 2 counter stadiums. I went with Ancient Ruins. Just helps a little bit with consistency. I didn't think there really wasn't a stadium that I was like, oh my gosh, this stadium will be perfect for this deck. Ancient Ruin was just the best of the bad stadiums. And then energy, we do play 14 energy. We went with 4 multi, 5 fire, 5 lightning. I think you can play around with this a little bit. Maybe go like 3 lightning, 7 fire, something like that. I haven't really seen too much of an issue with it. You usually get them in the discard pile pretty quick, and then Magneton gives you that freedom to get back what you want. I do like the slightly higher energy count at 14. Want to be able to, that we're getting those consistent energy drops down. And then, of course, You're not always going to... Sometimes you'll need to drop like 3 energy in a turn, so you can get 2 back with Magneton, then you're always going to want that extra one in your hand. Other than that, that's just going to finish up a really quick deck profile for a fun, cool rogue deck for the 2004 format. Once again, if anybody does know who came up with this deck, I posted down below. Like I said, the concept is not mine. The list is mine. I had a lot of fun building the deck, but I will say the original concept is not. So other than that, I'm going to cut it off here and just say I hope to see you in the next video.